Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. Diana, do you have any problems with your husband? The question came out of the blue, and for a moment I didn't know how to answer. What are you talking about? I think we have the usual problems that all married couples have. Why did the question arise? My colleague turned away, focusing on her hands while deciding whether to continue or not. Having made her decision, she moved on. Look, I don't really know how to tell you this. You know, my husband picked me up last weekend for our anniversary. Well, I'm sure I saw your husband at the same hotel, and he stayed there with another woman. What? Are you sure? It couldn't be. He would never do anything like that to me. You must have made a mistake. Well, maybe, but it was very similar. If it wasn't him, then he must have an identical doppelganger. We saw them both, such lovely lovebirds, several times up close, and it looked like your husband. Mark went fishing with his buddies last weekend. That's what he said. Now it seems that he had been fishing a little on the side, and it definitely looked like he had caught someone. I wanted to cry and scream and rip his throat out, all at the same time. How could he do this to me? What was wrong with him being ready to break up with me after 7 years of marriage in order to lie in bed with some fool? I murmured my thanks to Jane and returned to my office, plopping down in the upholstered chair I had for visitors. There were no signs that he was up to something bad. I've heard about the usual signs, such as excessive attention and excessive love, but it didn't happen. Mark was himself, caring and responsive. Was it his game? Did he know about these signs and tried not to show them? I was completely confused. No, it couldn't be him. It had to be someone like him. Still, I had nagging doubts. What if it was him? How can I be sure? If I ask him, he can just deny it. If he was having an affair, he could warn his buddies to cover for him. Remembering Sunday evening when he returned, I tried to remember something suspicious. He came in, kissed me on the cheek, grabbed a beer and started telling me about his weekend. There was nothing unusual about it. He complained that the fish wouldn't bite. The change they caught had to be thrown back. Yes, it was unusual. Mark always successfully fished. He is an excellent fisherman and knows this river like the back of his hand. He had been fishing as a boy ever since his father put his first fishing rod in his hand when he was 6 years old. And yet, maybe he's telling the truth. How can I find out? I decided to call one of his friends' wives about the upcoming school holiday and, during the discussion, ask about the fish he caught. Yes, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Hi, Emily, it's Diana. How are you? The first part of our conversation was about normal things, kids, school, and shopping mall sales. Not wanting to sound too worried, I let it drag on for 20 minutes before I got to the part one called for. I couldn't ask her directly. It would make her suspicious, and it would come back to Mark through her husband. Emily, do you have any good trout recipes? I was a little tired of the usual ways, such as baking and grilling, and I wanted something more exotic. How did you cook the fish that Dave brought home on Sunday? I waited with bated breath while Emily screamed at her children to shut up, telling them she was on the phone. I'm sorry, Diana. Fish recipes, Well, Dave is not very adventurous when it comes to food, so I stick to tried and trusted recipes. The fish he caught last weekend is still in the freezer. I didn't plan on cooking it until the end of the week to barbecue over the weekend. As she continued, my thoughts drifted in another direction. That bastard lied to me. The others caught the fish, but not him. Why? Because he wasn't fishing. He was making love to some fool. Well, when I'm done with him, it's going to cost him a lot. Diana? Diana? Are you here? Emily brought me back to the present, and I answered her through tears that began to drip. Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry the washing machine is working. I have to run. I'll call you later. Thanks for the advice. While my first impulse was to confront him, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had no real proof. He'll lie to get out, and he'll be on his guard. I need more evidence. That evening, Mark seemed withdrawn as we sat and had dinner. He praised me for the excellent food, but it seemed like there was no life in him. When I tried to speak, he answered in separate sentences, and it was obvious that he had other things on his mind. I hoped it was guilt, and it was tearing him apart from the inside, like it was tearing me apart. Later, we sat for a while and watched TV before he made a move. I'm going to bed. I'm not feeling my best, and I think I'm going to go to bed early. Are you going upstairs now? No. I think I'll watch a little more. The girls at work say it's worth a look. I'll come up later. Good night. Mark bent down to kiss me, but I turned my head and his lips touched my cheek. His surprised look was enough to warn me that I needed to come up with something quickly. I'm sorry, honey. I don't want to risk getting infected. I can't afford to get sick right now. Sweet dreams. My imagination was working overtime. There was no way I was going to kiss him after he cheated on me. In my mind's eye, I saw him doing the same thing to his beloved. The very thought made me feel sick. I was sitting in a crappy sitcom and waiting for him to fall asleep. Finally, an hour later, I tiptoed up to our room and quietly looked in on him. He was 6 feet 2 inches tall, and his head was lying on a crumpled pillow, pushed almost to the headboard. His hair was a wet mass and stuck to his head and face like a blonde cap. He was sweating profusely and his body was glistening with sweat. His sleep must have been restless, as the sheets were in a messy pile on his side of the bed. Mark usually slept peacefully, and I wondered if his restless sleep was caused by his guilty conscience or if he was dreaming about it. Damn him. Mark always slept naked, and tonight was no different. Lying on his back, his body was completely exposed to my gaze, and I looked at him in a new light. I loved this man with all my heart, and now I may lose him. Was that what I wanted? Maybe it was a one-time affair, and he would never cheat again. Did I really want to carry out my plan? I need to know. No matter how painful it might be or what the consequences would be, I have to find out. Mark was my first true love, and the man I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. The man I would like to see as the father of my children. How could he put all this at risk? I quietly took his wallet from the bedside table and quickly checked it for evidence. What I expected to find was an address, a phone number, even a few condoms. When we met, Mark always had a stock in his wallet. I quickly realized that using a condom wasn't for me, so I started taking pills, and he hasn't needed condoms since. That would be another nail in the lid of our marital coffin. There was no evidence in his wallet or pants pockets. So, where else can I check? His briefcase and the car also gave the same sterile results. By this time, it had almost become like a game. Every time I came back empty-handed, I had a feeling of disappointment, as if I had lost. Then I checked his email on our home computer, and when it turned out to be clean, I looked at his mobile phone. No luck there either. I was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, trying to figure out what my next step would be. In my opinion, he was guilty, and the lack of evidence didn't mean a damn thing. I was excited, and the coffee only intensified my hypertrophied state of mind. I thought about what I had done so far and decided that he wasn't smart enough not to leave some evidence of his deception. I just needed to find it. Suddenly it dawned on me. I knew where it would be, in his fishing gear, of course. He knew that I never messed with his fishing gear for fear of breaking something. Besides, I wasn't interested in fishing. In the garage, I had the same luck rummaging through his tackle box and other accessories. All I had was a couple of hooks in my fingers, which made me even angrier. I was almost ready to give up when I noticed his fishing jacket hanging on a hook behind the side door. This time, more carefully, so as not to hurt myself, I searched my pockets and finally found what I was looking for. A pack of free matches from the Hyatt Hotel in Carlton, a small town about 2 hours away. In my state of mind, that was enough to convict him and hang him. We had never been to this particular hotel, and I couldn't think of a reasonable explanation for him being there alone. Let's see how he gets out of this. When it dawned on me that he had really changed, the real pain began. I spent the next 2 hours alternating between anger, disappointment, and humiliation. I wanted to rush upstairs, pull him off our bed, and face him. No, it wasn't enough. I wanted to hurt him the same way he hurt me. I needed to see him experiencing the same pain and suffering as me. While I was thinking about my next step, a small pearl of an idea crept into my brain and slowly took shape. By the time I was ready to go to bed, I had almost formed my attack plan. I was going to get back at that bastard. I'll use someone, and then I'll bring the evidence home to Mark. I'll show him that two people can play this game. The problem was that I loved him, and the thought of losing him hurt me as much as the thought of him having an affair. I didn't want to divorce him, even though my first reaction was to throw his ass out on the street. Finding someone to make love to was easy. At 32, I looked good, and the guys in the office flirted with me. A few sales reps I've dealt with have been hitting on me from time to time, but so far I've always rejected them. Now I had a choice from a group of guys, some of whom were really handsome. One young guy in particular, Andy. Most of the girls in the office drooled every time he walked in. He was only 21 years old, and he had just graduated from the university where he studied on a sports scholarship. Andy is 6 feet tall, with dark piercing eyes and a muscular body. Quiet and unassuming, he seemed oblivious to the influence he exerted on the women around him. He exuded innocence, which made him even more attractive. I've made a decision. Andy will be my means of getting back at Mark. All I have to do is seduce him. He was a man, so it shouldn't be too difficult. Over the next week, I made my move on Andy. I dressed to showcase my best qualities with plunging necklines that gave him, and anyone else, a wide view of my 34D bust. I also wore my shortest, tightest skirts without panties, so that the panty lines were not visible. Of course, I had a lot of attention, and this time I played along with them. Flirting with guys made me feel wanted again. It's not like Mark didn't do all this for me. He was always very attentive, gave me little surprise gifts, bouquets of roses, and left little postcards everywhere for me to find them. It was just the realization that he had cheated that made me doubt my sensuality. The guy's attention was the balm I needed to soothe my shattered ego. Andy was easy. When he first saw me, his jaw dropped. He stood and stared. Walking up to him, I covered his mouth and then, in the most beautiful voice I could muster, I asked, "How are you, my love? Do you like what you see? If you play your cards right, you can see a lot more. If you want to, of course." Leaving him wondering if he had heard me correctly, I turned and walked away from him, emphasizing each step with a sway of my hips. The same action always caused a strong reaction in Mark, which led to a prolonged fuss. Will it have the same effect on Andy? Over the next 3 days, I continued to tease him, and he became more attentive and defiant in his flirting. A few girls told me to stop teasing him as it wasn't fair. He doesn't have a lot of experience with women, and he may misunderstand. Jane, on the other hand, knew exactly what I was up to, and her advice was more understandable. "Diana, what you're doing is unfair to Andy. He has no idea that you're using him to get back at your husband. If you have to do this, at least choose someone who can handle what's about to happen." "Thanks, Jane, but I think Andy will like it. Who knows, maybe I'll make it a regular thing with him." Jane just shrugged and walked away shaking her head, leaving me to continue my plan. As she closed the door, she said, "This is going to be a big mistake." Andy was interested, but he hadn't taken any steps yet, and I was in a hurry. Not understanding what was going on, he began to get upset because of my refusal to talk to him about our problem. I wanted him to sweat it out, but not for too long. I decided that this Saturday was the day of my revenge. "Andy, are you busy on Saturday night?" The light shining in his eyes told me the answer before he managed to croak out, "No, I didn't plan anything. Why are you asking?" "Well, I thought you might want to invite a lady to dinner, dancing, and everything that follows." "Are you interested?" "Hell yes." Then his face clouded. "But you're married. What about the husband?" "He doesn't need to know. Besides, we have some kind of agreement." I chuckled. "He just doesn't know about it yet." "Yes, of course." His face lit up with a knowing smile. "Where are we going?" "Well, I thought we'd have dinner in a cozy little restaurant, a few dances at the club, and then maybe we could find a room somewhere." "If you don't mind." Andy blushed, but he had recovered enough to realize that the next step was up to him. "Of course it sounds funny. I know a place like this, and there's a motel not far from it. I can book a room. It sounds like a date to me. You can pick me up at the north entrance to the mall parking lot at 7 p.m. and we'll drive your car." Bending down to give him a better look at me, I kissed him on the lips and then whispered, "See you then, lover." The plan was in action, and I don't think I could stop now, even if I wanted to. The second stage was to tell Mark that I had a bachelorette party and I wouldn't be back until late at night. Damn it. If Andy lived up to my dreams, I might not be home until Sunday. That night, after dinner, I dumped Mark. "Mark, honey, I called Susan today, and she and some of the girls are going out on Saturday night. They invited me, and I agreed." "Oh, I was hoping that we could spend a quiet night together and solve our problems. Can't you go another time?" I gave Mark one of my stern, don't mock me looks, and then told him, I'm going, whether you like it or not. I don't get to go out very often, and maybe another opportunity will come when I don't know. Mark was about to answer, but changed his mind and left the table. Turning at the door, he said to me, thank you for your concern. Then he wandered off to his workshop, probably to play with his damn fishing gear. I saw the pain in his eyes and almost succumbed to it, but then anger seized me, and a vision of him with some blonde girl flashed through my head. Fuck you, I called after him. That doesn't mean you care about my feelings. He left, and I don't think he heard the last part. It worked in my favor because he slept in the spare room for the next 2 nights. It might just become his permanent room if he wasn't careful, was my last thought before I went to bed that night. It was weird because it was the first time I'd slept alone since we got married. On Friday morning, he left before I even woke up, so I didn't know how he was dealing with it. I never realized how vindictive I could be, and it came as a real surprise to me. On the one hand, I was glad that he was in pain, but it was almost as painful for me to watch him suffer. I really love him, even in spite of his debauchery. I decided to try to relieve some tension on Friday night by having a special dinner for him. Baked potatoes, fried asparagus, and one of the trout he caught a couple of weeks ago, cooked in foil with herbs, chili, garlic, and olive oil. I knew it was one of his favorite dishes, and it might have calmed him down a bit. It would also ease the guilt I was starting to feel. The phone rang just as I was putting the finishing touches on the table decoration. I held the phone to my shoulder. The background noise was loud and I could barely hear. Hi, Diana. It's me, Mark. The guys are having a party tonight, and seeing that you're leaving tomorrow, I thought I'd spend the night with them. Don't wait. I'll probably be late. He hung up before I could answer. His voice sounded very angry, and for a moment I wondered if my revenge was such a good idea. Damn him, why is he doing this? He's out with the guys. I bet he's back with his fool tonight. Well, let's see who has the best time. I tried to fall asleep, but I tossed and turned until he came at 3 a.m. I heard his door close, and then 2 thuds as his shoes hit the floor. After that, nothing. I got up early on Saturday morning and prepared another surprise for him. When Mark finally surfaced, it was 12:30, and he looked like shit. He was wearing the same clothes he had been in the day before, but instead of the neat look he had left with, he was now disheveled and bleary-eyed. The front of his shirt was stained, and the right knee of his beige trousers was covered in dirt. Grumbling was the only response to my joyful greeting of good afternoon. I have to admit that it was more to piss him off than what I really felt. Taking a cup of coffee, he sat, or rather slumped, at the kitchen table. I saved your dinner for you. It's your favorite dish, so I thought you might like it for lunch. With that, I put a plate of burnt leftovers in front of him. 2 hours in the oven at high power can seriously affect such food. It took him a few minutes to realize what I had done. Pushing him away, he groaned, very funny. After finishing his coffee, he went back to bed to sleep off his hangover. Maybe he was with the boys last night. Of course, he would have been of little use in bed in the state he was in. Maybe she dumped him. The thought made me smile. Well, Marky, if you think you're feeling bad right now, wait until I get home tonight or sometime else. Saturday passed quickly. Without Mark, I could prepare for as long as I wanted without worrying about what he would think. Not that I really care at the moment. This plan had a life of its own, and I was dragged along by the forces that controlled it. By 6, I was almost done packing and had just put on my dress. I decided not to wear a bra or panties for 2 reasons. First of all, I thought Andy would be able to appreciate my body better if he felt me while dancing. Secondly, my underwear was expensive and I didn't want to lose anything. Mark got out of the shower while I was choosing shoes. I didn't hear him get up and go to the bathroom. He came into our room to get fresh clothes and saw what I was going to wear. Damn it, Diana. You're not going to date girls dressed like that, are you? Do you have a date with someone? Don't do this. We can talk about it. Please don't do this. His pleading made him sound like a weakling, and that only made me angrier. I couldn't stand it and yelled at him. I told you I'm dating girls. If you want to talk, we can talk when I get home. Maybe then you'll listen to me. Now pack your things and get out. I need to finish getting dressed, otherwise I'll be late. Mark stood and watched, and then said something I never expected to hear. Any thought I had that he was a weakling was quickly dispelled by the strength in his voice. Diana, I know you're cheating on me. I do not know who, but when I find out, he will be named in the divorce. Your attitude towards me in the last 2 weeks has been so detached, and now this. I can only come to one conclusion. You're having an affair. A tear rolled down his eye, and he wiped it away before continuing. I won't be a cuckold. If I find evidence that you cheated, our marriage is over. Think about it before you leave tonight. When he grabbed his clothes from the closet, I answered him, sauce for goose is sauce for goose. Not quite understanding what I meant, he went to get dressed in the guest room. Now he held a high moral position because he didn't know that I knew about his deception. He wouldn't be so cocky once everything was known. At least that's what I've been trying to convince myself of. He didn't come down before I left, so I left a note taped to the refrigerator door. I knew Mark, and as soon as he had a problem that needed to be solved, he would reach for a beer. That doesn't mean he's an alcoholic, but the beer in his hand helps him think. A lot of guys are like that. Mark, you know I love you, but these last 2 weeks have been hell for me. I know we need to talk, so I decided I'd be home by 2 in the morning. Please wait for me, and I think we can solve our problems and continue healing our marriage. I want you to stay my husband more than anything in the world, but until we solve our problems, I'm afraid it won't be possible. With love, Diana. Andy was waiting for me when I pulled up, and my heart skipped a beat when I saw him. This is not the same shy guy as in the office. He wore a red silk shirt to the party, unbuttoned almost to the waist, exposing a muscular chest and a muscular belly to die for. His trousers were wide, but tailored and fit him perfectly. He was wearing a dark blue lightweight wool jacket that accentuated the whole outfit. My decision not to wear panties came back to haunt me. It turned out not to be such a good idea. I hoped I didn't have a wet spot on the bottom of my back. As I approached, I bent down to kiss him on the cheek, but he moved quickly and caught me off guard. His arms wrapped around me, and his mouth covered mine hard and demanding. It wasn't what I expected, but he was inexperienced, and I just needed to show him how to please a woman. Finally, he let go of me and dragged me to his car. The restaurant is nearby. I hope you enjoy Italian cuisine. Italian cuisine is not the kind of food that I really like, and I usually prefer something else. It was too late anyway. Yes, I love the Italian restaurant. Lead on. The restaurant was nice, but noisy and crowded. There is no place for romance here. I will have to wait until we go to the club for more intimate activities. I was surprised by the quality of the food and really enjoyed it. At some point, I caught myself thinking that one day I would bring Mark here. Andy seemed to be well known here, and most of the staff and the owner greeted him by name. She was a chubby Italian mom who kept coming up to him, nudging him and winking at me. Twice she gave him the OK sign with her thumb and forefinger. By 8 o'clock, the food and 2 bottles of wine were gone, and we were ready to move on. The club was only half a block away, so we walked and talked. I took his hand and clung to him, watching the envious glances of the other girls we passed. You were very popular there. I take it this is not your first time? Damn it, no. I spend all my first dates there. It kind of sets me up for later, don't you think? I grumbled something in response as I processed the information. It wasn't his first real date. So what? He was shy and awkward and was probably a virgin. There was little in the atmosphere of the restaurant that would create the mood for anything. His inexperience is showing again. As soon as we talk and I show him all the best things in life, he'll understand it. Andy is a smart boy. He put his arm around my waist. It was really nice. But there were about 20 people waiting to enter the club, and I felt like a cheater standing there being groped. Lowering his hand, I whispered, "Later, my love." I headed to the end of the line, but he surprised me again. Andy walked up to the bouncer at the door and high-fived him. "Hey dude, how are you? Is there some room for 2?" The bouncer smiled at him and then looked at the disgruntled guys in the queue. "For my best client? Always." Removing the chain, he let us through. Andy slipped him some money. Upon entering, we paid the entrance fee and received 2 free drink cards. A deafening noise crashed down on me, making even the walls tremble. We squeezed onto a small dance floor and tried to follow some kind of rhythm. It was impossible, and in the end I motioned him into a corner to give us some respite. Now we could start having real fun. The couples around us hugged and groped each other, and in the darkened room I felt less constrained. Grabbing him, I planted a deep French kiss on his lips, determined to teach him how to kiss to please a woman. He came back with a kiss that made my knees go weak. His tongue reached out to mine and explored the depths of my mouth. For the next hour, we hugged and groped each other. I must admit, I was a little disappointed, since he was smaller than Mark. Nevertheless, he was young, and what he lacks in size, I think he will make up for in endurance. At 9:30, I was just getting into the mood, and the music had dulled my senses so much that I no longer felt like I was inside a bass drum in the middle of a parade. Damn it, look at the time. We'd better leave. The motel is right across the street. But, Andy, I've just started having fun, and we still have a lot of time. No, I told them that we would be there before 10. If we were late, they would vacate the room. This place is so close that it is very popular on a Saturday night. Taking my hand, we headed for the door. This time we were stepped on only twice. Once outside, I wondered if I was deaf forever, as I could hardly hear movement or people in line. Without waiting, Andy grabbed my arm and dragged me across the street, dodging cars inch by inch, shouting insults at drivers if they honked at us. This night was turning into a nightmare, and I decided that this would be my one and only evening with Andy, unless he caught me off guard in bed, which he did. Once in the doorway, Andy grabbed me and kissed me, at the same time pulling off my dress. I tried to calm him down, but it had no effect. Calm down, my love. Let me show you how to please a woman. Wiggling his eyebrows, which I hate, he grinned. I've never had any complaints before. Okay, so he wasn't a virgin, but at least he had an experience. His whole approach told me that he lacked practice in pleasing a woman. Oh, yes, and how many girls were there? Girls? God, I stopped making love to them when I was 17. You won't believe how many lustful women are hanging around the highway in search of adventure. Teachers, members of the parent committee, and mothers of other athletes. It's been a smorgasbord for 4 years. Was this guy kidding? If he's been hanging out with real women for 4 years, hasn't he learned anything? Let's calm down and play a little first. We have a few hours to do the real thing. Yes, I love foreplay. Having said that, he took off his boxers and pushed me to my knees in front of him. Jane was right. I should have picked one of the older guys, or maybe just met Mark face to face. I have to go through this tonight. I would get rid of him as soon as possible, and then go home early. Well, that was my intention, but you know what they say about the most thoughtful plans. I hope Mark appreciates what I had to put up with to save our marriage. When Andy stabbed me, I compared Mark's tender love to the attack that took place here. Kind, attentive Mark, who made a mistake and whom I have to face and forgive. God, what about sexually transmitted diseases? In my haste, I forgot to ask him about protection. Well, it's too late now. It was all over. Collapsing onto the bed, he grinned at me and said, "How was it? How was it?" God, I could barely walk after that knock. That bastard left me to my fate. Well, Mark could catch up later. A great lover. But I have to go. I have a date with my husband, and I wouldn't want to be late. It was so damn late. It was only 10 o'clock at night. We only made love for 20 minutes, and I felt like the whole football team had gone through me. Oh, you can't leave yet. In search of my dress and shoes, I told him, I'll take care of it another time, baby, but I'm in a hurry right now. You can't leave. What will I tell my buddies when they arrive? They were looking forward to it. I told them how hot you are, and how you can handle all of them. I did it for you, baby. I know what cheaters like you need. He said it like he was sure it would change my mind. You did what? Did you arrange for me to be used by your buddies? How dare you? Who the hell do you think you are? I'm not that kind of girl. From where I am, I see a married woman cheating on her husband, trying to get dressed. To me, it means cheater. Now stop pretending and come back here. I want some of this ass before the others arrive. Unfortunately for him, the closest thing to me was the lamp on the bedside table. It had a heavy ceramic base that hit him on the head, causing him to freeze. Not sure if I killed him. I checked his pulse and breathing, and he seemed fine. A trickle of blood was running down his cheek, and he would have a terrible headache when he woke up. Well, damn it, he deserved it. Grabbing my purse, I ran out of the room, leaving the door ajar so his buddies could find him and keep an eye on him. I ran, blinded by tears, 3 blocks to my car and collapsed behind the wheel. I had to wait until my hands stopped shaking before I could put the key in the ignition and start the damn thing. The date that was so promising turned into hell. I was angry and upset about Andy. He made a fool of me with his innocent little boy behavior, and I, an idiot, fell for it. Maybe I'm old-fashioned, but there should be some romance in a date. But this new age approach didn't seem to involve any seduction from a guy. What bothered me the most was that he thought I was a cheater who would attack his buddies and enjoy it. Did I really project such an image? The journey home was a mixture of humiliation and pain. I couldn't blame Mark for that. I brought it on myself, so I had to put up with it. I pulled into the driveway, sat for a while, and then got ready for what was going to happen. Mark was waiting in the living room and looked up in shock when I stumbled in. I do not know if it was because I came early or because of the state I was in. My hair and makeup are in disarray. One shoulder strap is missing from my dress, and my shoes are left in the car. I definitely looked like I was being royally used. Well, you did it. All this nonsense about loving me, wanting to save our marriage. What does it all mean? Did you really think that I would accept this and continue as if nothing had happened? I hope it was worth it. That last part hurt. He was the second person to call me a cheater tonight, and I had had enough. Now just listen, mister. I know about your little love nest 2 weeks ago. You were seen at the Hyatt Hotel in Carlton with some blonde woman. So don't be so moral towards me. All I did was make love out of revenge. So you know how I felt. Now we need to discuss all this and live our lives. I'll make coffee, and we can sit down like we used to and sort this out. I stopped to catch my breath, and Mark took the floor. I do not know who anyone saw, but it was not me. I was 200 kilometers away, on the other side of the state, fishing, as I said before. Now I've played my trump card. Jane saw you. She was there with her husband, and they saw you with another woman. I also found this in your fishing jacket. I pulled out the matches and threw them at him. How come Dave caught a fish that weekend and you didn't? Because you weren't fishing. Exhausted, I collapsed into a chair. Okay, I'm waiting for your lies, or you could tell the truth for a change. Mark's look of disgust made me go cold, and I shuddered. First of all, Dave almost never catches fish, but he likes to go with us. Either we'll give him a couple of them to keep Emily quiet, or, as in this case, he'll buy them on the way home. The matches are not mine. They belong to Steve. He travels with his work and probably picked them up during the trip. One evening he gave them to me for kindling, and I must have put them in my pocket. Mark was angry, and I had to admit that either he was telling the truth or he was thinking fast. And what about Jane seeing you? Explain it. I do not know this Jane, so I cannot explain it, but I can prove that I was on the other side of the state on Saturday afternoon. Pulling out his wallet, he took out a gas station receipt, stamped and dated from a gas station on the other side of the state, just as he said. Damn it, he was good. He must have figured out in advance what I was mad about and managed to forge this receipt. It even had his car registration on it. I almost told him it was a fake. But then I remembered that I had seen the receipt in his wallet the night I checked. Everything was not going as I had planned. But Jane did. Who the hell is Jane? You know Jane, who works with me. No, I don't know her. I've heard you talk about her, but I've never met her. When we meet, of course, I will tell her everything I think. Why did she want to ruin my marriage? Why did I upset her so much? He was right. She had never met him. How did she know it was him? She saw his picture on my desk quite often. That must be the way it is. While I was thinking about it, Mark disappeared into the kitchen, probably for another beer so we could sort things out. Here are your things. Let me know where you're staying and I'll send the rest. He returned with 2 suitcases, which he threw in front of me. Taking my purse, he took out the key to the house. I'm meeting with a lawyer on Monday morning and filing for divorce. I transferred half of the joint funds to my own account. What's left in the joint account is yours. Now get out. This couldn't be happening. What have I done? He denied cheating on me, even after he was seen. Okay, he explained other things, but not that. He probably swapped cars with Steve or someone else, and they filled up with gasoline to cover him. That's all. He just acted like a macho man and took responsibility. As soon as he calms down, we'll sort it out. Okay, I'll go, But let's talk about this before you start spending money on a divorce lawyer. I know you'll figure it out as soon as you calm down. Taking the bags, I carried them to the car and sat down, wondering where to go next. I didn't want to go to my mom, especially like this. The next option was a local hotel. I looked like a local cheater. They did give me a room, but with strict instructions, no men. Who could blame them? It took all my willpower, but I gave Mark a chance to think. For 2 weeks, I waited for him to come to his senses and come back to me. Finally, I had enough and called him at home. As soon as he heard my voice, he hung up. I called back twice, and each time he did the same thing. I waited an hour, then tried again, but it was busy. He took the receiver off the hook. The next day, I called him at work, but his secretary told me that he was not taking my calls. If I have something important, I should contact his lawyer. Mark held onto his gun and refused to talk to me. For 3 months, I've been trying to get him to talk to me and figure out the reason. If I could come to terms with his cheating, why couldn't he do the same? I was getting more and more upset every day. How could he not understand my point of view? I lost all my anger, replacing it with bouts of depression and bouts of crying. My life had turned to shit, and I didn't understand why. Then I tried to wait for him at home, but he just looked at me, then ignored me and went inside, closing the door in my face. The next day, I was handed an intervention order at work. This forbade me to try to contact Mark directly and approach him within 100 meters. Andy took care to get revenge by telling everyone at work that I had fun with him and his comrades. Even though I denied it, everyone else saw me teasing him and believed his story. All the men pestered me for weeks until I kneed Andy in the balls, and only then did they realize. I couldn't afford to stay at the hotel, so I returned home to my parents. They sympathized with me, but said it was my own fault. I should have talked to Mark. As Dad said, 2 mistakes don't do good. I lived in the hope that he wouldn't get a divorce. He was just trying to scare me into backing off and apologizing. How the hell could I apologize if he didn't want to talk to me? I remember that Tuesday clearly. I was sitting at my desk, finishing the bill, when the secretary called and said that 2 men wanted to see me at the counter. Thinking that they were sellers, I put on my best smile and went to meet them. Mark was standing there with another man and talking quietly. My heart skipped a beat. Did he forgive me? Mark nodded in my direction and said something to another man who came up to me. Mark stood on the sidelines, not taking part in what was about to happen. That's when I realized that my marriage was over. Diana Andrews? I nodded affirmatively, unable to speak. Your husband, Mark Andrews, is filing for divorce. The reason for this is your adultery. If you don't have a lawyer, then I suggest you do it as soon as possible. Nodding to Mark, he left after completing the task assigned to him. Mark, no. I thought you loved me. How could you do this to us? I love you. I know we have problems, but of course we can deal with them if we love each other. Mark's voice was cold, his words calculated and almost impassive. I really loved you with all my heart, but you took that love and ripped it out of me, and with it my heart. Now all I feel for you is pity. You decided to listen to someone who doesn't even know me. Anyway, where is this fool? I want to say a few words to her. Yes, she will prove that you cheated, and we can forget about it. I'll call her. Running up to the table, I asked the giggling secretary to call Jane for me. Jane came, and I thought I could finally get him to admit the truth. Jane, tell Mark what you saw that weekend at the hotel. Jane shrugged and told her story again. I saw your husband staying there with another woman. Mark gasped. Did you see me staying at the Hyatt Hotel in Carlton? Jane shook her head. No, I saw her husband, not you, and it wasn't the Hyatt. We stayed at the Regent Hotel in West Bend. Mark and I were both confused, but for different reasons. What is she talking about? Jane turned to me and said, I do not know what is going on here, but I saw the same person who came here and picked you up for lunch and after work. The man you took with you to that 3-day conference in August 2 years ago. You introduced him to us as your husband, Wally. Fear paralyzed me when I realized that she was talking about a guy with whom I had a brief affair 2 years ago. This story completely slipped my mind. Jane really didn't know my husband. It dawned on Mark at the same moment, and an expression of triumph distorted his face. Mark turned and left, shouting for everyone to hear, See you in court. My fate was sealed.